In college, we often talk about good and bad sources, fake news, traditional journalism, clickbait, peer review, advertising, opinion, and editorial. The truth is, we encounter an overwhelming amount of information every day. This video will outline how some of the information you encounter every day is created, not to help you decide whether it's good or bad, but to think about the relative value of a tweet versus a book. One way to think about the spectrum of information is to understand the publication processes for different sources and how this creates a sort of timeline. We call this timeline the information cycle. When an event happens, different sources, social media, websites, newspapers, magazines, academic journals, books, will tell the story of that event at different points in time. Let's look at an example. April 25th, 2014, the city of Flint, Michigan switched the city's drinking water from Detroit's water supply to the local Flint River. At first, city officials denied it was unsafe, but by August 2014, the city issued boil warnings because of unsafe levels of bacteria. And in 2015, the EPA found unsafe levels of lead in the water. By January 2016, the president had declared a state of emergency in Flint and the surrounding areas because residents were left without safe water to drink or even bathe in. This, by the way, is still the case as of spring 2018. Local print journalists reported on the story as it happened, reporting on the water supply switch and then on citizen complaints and eventually on the investigation of the water quality and the crisis that followed. News sources often report on an issue within hours or days of the event, especially local news. News stories are reported by professional journalists, must meet editorial standards for that publication or outlet, and are usually vetted by fact checkers, editors, producers, and publishers. However, given the immediacy of their reporting, news stories will always evolve over time, and sometimes initial reporting will be wrong. But stories of the Flint water crisis also started showing up early on in social media and blogs. Social media and personal accounts online aren't often considered sources for research, but they're sources of information we encounter every day, and they have an important place in the information cycle. These sources are written by the general public, sometimes include eyewitness accounts or stories from people who are living the event. They are subjective, and they don't usually have any prescribed editing, fact-checking, or publication process. However, sometimes a story or an account comes up on social media or blogs that goes unreported or ignored elsewhere, as some Flint residents have felt their story has been. Weeks and months after the story of the Flint water crisis filtered through social media and news media, long-form publications and magazines produced in-depth articles on the crisis. Magazine articles are usually written by journalists or professional writers, and most magazines have publishing standards and processes similar to newspapers, with editors and fact-checkers who are accountable for what's written. These longer articles provide a bigger picture about an event weeks or months afterwards. Magazine articles often feature interviews and profiles that provide subjective but insightful perspectives, and can be more stylized rather than the straightforward writing found in newspapers. The first academic journal articles documenting the environmental health crisis in Flint were not published until 2016, nearly 2 years after the crisis began. In February 2016, an article in the American Journal of Public Health concluded that a statistically significant number of children in Flint had elevated, unsafe levels of lead in their blood, especially children from economically disadvantaged areas. Academic journals are written by scholars or researchers within a particular discipline, like psychology, communications, or medicine, and are reviewed by a panel of scholars with expertise in the field for validity and quality before publication. But research studies often take time, months, or even years. So an event like the Flint water crisis can take years to make it into an academic journal. These journals publish original, peer-reviewed research with transparent methods and results and thorough citations. However, academic journals are not written for the general public and can be dense with jargon and analyses. Finally, a topic like the Flint water crisis can take years to make it into a published book, although by that time the bigger picture that wasn't visible in the early days or weeks after the event has become clear. Nonfiction books are usually written by professional writers, scholars, or journalists. Most publishers have editorial standards that a book must meet before it's published, mostly because publishing a print book is a costly investment. Book manuscripts are usually reviewed by an editor and fact checkers before they can be published. A book is the source most likely to provide the widest scope on a controversial topic. However, the time it takes to write, edit, publish, and print a book can mean that it will be slightly out of date by the time it's released. The cycle of information doesn't go just one direction. A story like Flint's water crisis ripples back and forth through social media to news and academic writing as we all try to make sense of it. But knowing the purpose, publishing process, and authors of the sources you encounter can help you make informed decisions about what sources make sense for the question you're answering or the problem you're trying to solve. And remember, if you have a question about any kind of research, you can ask a librarian.